Hello and welcome to the LLG Grapevine podcast. You're listening to Helen Bennett, LLG's Executive Director of Policy and Governance, and Dennis Hall, LLG Bulletin Editor.
Hello, everyone.
Now, Dennis, big news last week in terms of local government reorganisation, in that elections, which were due in May 2026 as part of a new devolution deal, creating combined authorities, will now be delayed by 2 years to 2028. The areas affected are Norfolk and Suffolk, Sussex and Brighton, Hampshire and the Solent, and Greater Essex. I think ministers are arguing that the delay is needed to allow more time for local government reorganisation. The local government secretary, who's Steve Reed at the moment, said that the aim is to ensure new mayors have these structures and organisations in order to hit the ground running from day one. But opposition parties have accused Labour of cancelling democracy and running scared of voters. So will we see county elections instead? Don't know. But Dennis, let's get back. It is interesting, but that's certainly a long period of time for sitting councillors. But Dennis, let's get back to the bulletin and our roundup from last week.
Right. Well, I want to begin with this announcement that the government is to ditch the day one unfair dismissal policy from the workers' bill rights. As you know, a flagship policy that would have given workers the right to claim unfair dismissal after their first day on the job is to be ditched by the government in favour of a 6-month threshold. In a U-turn constituting a direct breach of Labour's manifesto, the government said it had brokered a deal between 6 of the country's biggest business groups and trade union leaders to shake up its plan for the biggest upgrade in employment rights for a generation.
Yeah, and the move comes after the business secretary, that's Peter Kyle, told businesses at the CBI conference last week that he would listen to concerns about the effects of the law change on hiring. A trade union source told Guardian, quote, they've capitulated and there may be more to come.
Now, the Trades Union Congress said it was prepared to accept the compromise arrangement after days of negotiation, saying the absolute priority now is to get these rights, like day one sick pay, on the statute book so that working people can start benefiting from them from next April. And this was the comment by General Secretary Paul Nowak. Now, a TUC source said there was a view that the 6-month threshold was more workable than the more loosely defined 9-month probation period, which will be scrapped.
Yeah, I think MPs are likely to be unnerved by the breach of Labour's manifesto, which promised day one protection against unfair dismissal, whilst trade unions descended into infighting, it seems, over the 11th hour change. The reversal adds pressure to ministers already battling accusations that Rachel Reeves' budget broke Labour's pre-election promises not to raise taxes on working people.
And Peter Kyle actually replaced Jonathan Reynolds as business secretary, the latter having steered through the legislation with the former Deputy Prime Minister, Angela Rayner. And at the time of writing, the government has confirmed the move to a 6-month qualifying period. But the amendments needed to give effect to this change have not yet been published.
No, we haven't seen them. And until those amendments are tabled, the full scope of the revised approach just can't be confirmed. And this includes the government's commitment that any future change to the qualifying period will require primary legislation and that statutory compensation cap will be lifted. There are also unconfirmed reports that the proposed 9-month statutory probation period may be dropped altogether, but again, this is not being confirmed, Dennis.
Yeah, and I think it's the case that the House of Commons should have voted on the proposed amendments yesterday. That's the 8th of December. Now, if both houses reach agreement before Parliament breaks for the holiday period on the 18th of December, the bill could receive royal assent in time to become the Employment Rights Act 2025 rather than 2026.
Michaelmas. Am I pronounced that correctly?
Yep.
Do people still use that phraseology? I don't know. It's antiquated.
Well, in some quarters, perhaps here in the northeast of England, you tend not to hear it. But of course, it is a term of the court year and is used still in religious circumstances, of course.
Well, HR departments do need to move quickly to assess their policies and contracts when they know more, and we'll keep members updated. Now I want to turn to local audit reform, and this is the government's response to the consultation to overhaul local audit in England.
And you know, Helen, when we've looked at this, it is remarkable, isn't it, that only 1% of local government bodies publish their audited accounts in time for the original 2022 to 23 deadline. And in September 2023, the audit backlog in England peaked at 918 outstanding unaudited accounts, which the government states signals a paralysis of the local system. More recently, the whole of government accounts for the financial year 2022 to 23 were disclaimed in autumn 2024, primarily due to a lack of audit assurance on local government accounts.
Well, on the 18th of December 2024, the government did publish its statement of intent and consultation on proposals to overhaul the current local audit system in England. Now, the government indicated that there is a general endorsement of reform to the audit system, and that many organisations welcome the proposed strategy for overhauling local audit, and many agree that reform must progress at pace, especially to clear the audit backlog and restore confidence in the system. Now, we've talked about the establishment of the local audit office. That's a central body with the intention of it streamlining local audit functions. I think in the response that was broadly welcomed, with many respondents, however, stressing the importance of clear governance structures, a phased implementation, and ensuring that its role is proportionate. And that's important, I think.
Indeed, it is. And Helen, having looked at this, there are three big takeaways from the response, Helen, which are that the government wants to prioritise first clearing the backlog of local authority audits through statutory deadlines and a transition plan, and second, by creating a new system leader for local audit to oversee quality, timeliness and resilience, and third and finally, by strengthening accountability by improving transparency, financial reporting and assurance for taxpayers.
Well, I understand the government's immediate next steps are to enforce the statutory deadlines to clear the audit backlog. I'm not sure it's as simple as that, though.
No, not at all.
Appoint and empower the new local audit system leader, roll out the transition plan with governance boards and reporting standards, and as you've said, around assurance, strengthen accountability and transparency measures. There's lots in it, Dennis, and
Indeed.
we will report again on these proposals.
Yes, of course. Well, now we turn from one regulator to another. Ofsted. Ofsted has now announced plans, finally, to reform inspections of local authorities' children's services across 2026 and 2027, including, and this is important, the removal of the much criticised overall effectiveness judgment from April 2026. The decision follows feedback from the Big Listen consultation and reflects Ofsted's commitment to making inspections fairer. Now, revisions to the inspections of local authorities' children's services, known as the ILACS or ILACS, alterations to the framework include aligning inspections with broader reforms happening across children's social services.
Well, the watchdog noted that these changes will ensure inspections reflect the changing expectations on children's services, which include a greater focus on supporting children and their families to stay together, get the help they need to be safe, and have stable and loving homes. Sounds perfect. In 2026, I understand Ofsted will also provide further training for ILACS inspectors to, quote them here, support their understanding of sector reforms and how they impact on their work. That's interesting.
It is. And the creation of an advisory reference group bringing together national advisors, nominated sector experts and representatives from Pathfinder local authorities will also help deliver inspector training and provide valuable insight during the period of inspection improvement, said the watchdog. And lastly, Ofsted announced plans to reform how it evaluates and reports on local children's services. All of this is to the good. In 2026, it will consult with children, professionals and local leaders on proposals to develop a renewed children and families services framework to be introduced later in 2027.
Yeah, and His Majesty's Chief Inspector, that's Sir Martin Oliver, in response to this, I think I'll give his little quote soundbite because it's
Yep.
informative. He said, during the big listen, social care professionals were consistently positive about our inspections, but told us that single word overall effectiveness judgments oversimplified the complexities of their work. I have to agree. And he went on that he was committed to reforming children's social care inspections to raise standards and to do right by children and the professionals that support them, and the removal of the headline judgment in ILEX, inspection of local authorities' children's services, is a significant first step in fulfilling this commitment.
And going on, he said, we know that most children are best served by remaining safely within a loving, supportive family. The move to family help, including early help and prevention, is a key focus of the wider reforms happening across children's social care. And it is important, he said, that our inspections reflect this, and I look forward to speaking more about the updates we will be making to our framework during 2026. Again, he said, looking further ahead, we will build on our strong existing foundations to bring the best of ILACs into a renewed framework to be introduced in 2027. And I look forward, he said, to hearing from children, professionals and local leaders as we develop our plans next year.
Yeah, well, let's stick with children. The independent provider of special education advice, IPSI, has said that the SEND system, so we talk about this a lot. The SEND system is adversarial not because of existence of the law, but because the law is, quote, routinely not applied correctly. Now, IPSI has written to the Secretary of State for Education, that's Bridget Phillipson, we've mentioned her before, about the government's plans to reform the system for supporting children and young people with SEND, highlighting the charity's view that reforms shouldn't be rushed. Well, I think that's why the government's holding back, actually.
Yeah.
It keeps making these announcements
Yes.
on SEND reform, but yeah.
Yeah. We'll have to see. And last month, the Secretary of State announced that the school's white paper, which will include SEND reform, has been delayed, as you say, until 2026. In a letter to the chair of the House of Commons Education Committee, she set out the government's 5 principles for SEND reform: early, local, fair, effective and shared. Now, Minister for School Standards, Georgia Gould, has announced a nationwide programme of engagement events designed to shape the future of support for children with special educational needs and disabilities.
Yeah, so over the coming months, there will be 9 face-to-face events run in partnership with the Council for Disabled Children and 5 online sessions. And the intention is that this will provide opportunities for parents, families and professionals to share their experiences and ideas, opening up a direct line to the people who know the system best. I think it's always preferable to hear from them. The conversations will be guided by 5 key principles of reform, as you've said, Dennis, and these are early intervention, local provision, fairness, effective practice, and shared working.
Yes, indeed.
And attendees will be able to discuss proposals such as written records of support for children, access to independent advocacy for families, and a national framework to send provision across all settings.
And Minister Gould explained, for too long, families have felt unheard and left to battle a system that simply doesn't deliver for their children. We're committed to breaking down barriers to opportunity, she said, putting lived experience at the heart of reform and creating a direct line to parents across the nation. We want, she said, this to be the biggest national conversation on SEND in a generation.
Well, supporting the programme are leading experts, including Tom Rees, who's the chair of the Department for Education's Expert Advisory Group for Inclusion, and Dame Christine Linehan. I probably pronounced that wrong. How would you pronounce that?
Lenahan.
Lenahan. Look at me. Well done, Dennis. Tom Rees noted there's a strong consensus that the system doesn't work well enough and needs reforming so that it works for all children. Agreed. At the same time, there is good practice within schools that we can build on and learn from. And I look forward to this period of further engagement on the opportunity to bring ministers and officials together with parents, professionals, and children right across the country. Now, let's hope that there's good feedback and that something can change in terms of provision.
Yes, it's a key ask, a key ambition, and one that the government will certainly be judged upon, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But turning to something quite different now, as the government announces its publication of a new national licensing policy framework, the Department for Business and Trade has published a national licensing policy framework, the first ever, for the hospitality and leisure sectors, setting out its strategic vision for a modern licensing system. The framework, named the National Licensing Policy Framework, wait for it, the NLPF, is designed to provide, quote, a high-level strategic steer for how the current licensing system should operate, both in safeguarding communities and enabling responsible hospitality and leisure businesses to succeed.
Yeah, it's interesting. It aims to align licensing practices with national priorities,
Mm.
including economic growth, cultural development, jobs, regeneration, public safety, and community well-being. And it's also intended, as I understand it, to guide local statements of licensing policy and related strategies with wider government priorities for the economy and for society.
Yes, and the NLPF document states, and I quote, "We have heard from hospitality businesses that disproportionate licensing conditions can stifle their growth and reduce options for consumers. We're therefore asking licensing authorities to explicitly consider the need to promote growth and deliver economic benefits in their decisions, and setting this out in the first National Licensing Policy Framework. And the government plans to monitor the framework's impact and consider whether other steps, such as making growth of the hospitality sector a statutory licensing objective, if this may be needed."
Yeah, well, the framework is non-statutory guidance designed to support consistent, lawful, and proportionate licensing. Licensing authorities, of course, must have regard to the Secretary of State's guidance under Section 182 of the Licensing Act
Mm.
2003 and to their statements of licensing policy, of course.
Yes, and back to the document, it says the framework does not displace those duties or create new legal obligations or restrict authorities' discretion to determine each application on its merits. However, authorities should take the framework into account as guidance, it adds. And it goes on and says, at the next review, authorities should explain in their statement of licensing policy how they have had regard to it. Where any inconsistency arises between this framework and the 2003 Act or Section 182 guidance, the latter prevails. Decisions must be necessary and proportionate, it goes on, non-discriminatory and, of course, consistent with the regulator's code.
Yeah, well, let's hope there aren't any inconsistencies.
Exactly.
The framework will be reviewed 6 months after publication to assess early impact and whether further clarification is needed, the government said. I'm always a big fan of that, always
Mm.
review and take a look down the line.
Yes.
Felix Faulkner, who's an associate solicitor at Poppleston's Allen, has been quoted around this framework as saying that this represents a notable rebalancing of licensing policy, excuse me, moving away from an approach focused solely on risk mitigation towards one designed to enable innovation and investment across the sector.
Yes, and he added, although non-statutory, the framework is intended to influence local licensing policy. Licensing authorities are encouraged to have regard to its principles and reflect them in their own statements of licensing policy at their next review. And the government have explicitly outlined that they are asking licensing authorities to consider the need to promote growth and deliver economic benefit in their decisions when making those decisions.
Do you know, Dennis, I can't talk about licensing without thinking and honouring the great late Stephen Turner, who was such a
Yes,
font of all knowledge when it came to
he would have definitely been across all of this.
absolutely such a loss to the sector and
Mm.
the local government community. And now for our final story today. There's some big news. It's being championed for local communities and small businesses across England. And this is the news that councils, police, and fire authorities are about to get new powers that the government says could make a real difference on the ground, because they'll be able to reserve bidding for lower value contracts to just UK-based suppliers.
Mm.
And even more specifically, to businesses in their own local area.
Yes, and Helen, here's the impact. It opens the door, they say, to over £1 billion of potential spending every year being directed straight to local firms. And it's part of a wider push to cut red tape, simplify the public contracts regime, and make sure smaller businesses aren't locked out of government business.
Yeah. So Chris Ward, who's the parliamentary secretary at the Cabinet Office, put it like this. We're changing the rules that have held back councils from investing in local businesses, the lifeblood of local economies. This will put power back in the hands of our communities to drive growth, unlock skilled jobs, and create local investments that reward working people.
And Alison McGovern, Minister of State for Local Government and Homelessness, echoed that by saying, "We want councils to help create jobs, opportunities and growth right across the country. Making sure they can prioritise our brilliant local businesses is a huge step forward, and it means more money going to firms that know their areas best and can invest in the communities that they serve."
Yeah, let's have a little bit of law, tiny bit. How is this going to take effect? Well, the change will disapply Section 17, subsection 5, subsection E of the Local Government Act 1988 in certain circumstances, giving councils the flexibility to support local growth while still keeping fair competition and value for money at the heart of procurement, so says the government.
Mm. And it also brings local authorities in line with the flexibility that Whitehall already use when buying goods and services. And it follows on from the National Procurement Policy Statement published earlier this year, which set out the expectation that public bodies should deliver wider social and economic value when awarding contracts.
Mm. Well, Tina McKenzie, who is the policy chair at the Federation of Small Businesses, obviously welcomed the move. She said it's great to see the government listening to small businesses and taking action. This is exactly the kind of practical reform we called for, giving local authorities the tools to make it easier for small firms to take on public work.
And from the Local Government Association, Councillor Dan Swords added, councils have a key role in driving local growth. These changes will give them greater freedoms to buy local, keeping more of what they spend in their communities. Local suppliers, SMEs and voluntary organisations will all benefit, creating jobs and strengthening supply chains.
Yeah. So in short, more contracts reserved for local firms, more opportunities for small businesses, and more money staying in communities. £1 billion loss of money, Dennis.
Indeed it is.
And let's hope this reform really does give a boost to the local communities across England.
Yes.
And on that note, that's it for another edition of the podcast. You can read more on the items discussed today and many more besides by going to bulletin number 42, available on the LLG website now. So it's goodbye from me.
And from me too. Bye bye now.